Welcome to the Art of Creation show. I'm your host, Rebecca Boswell. And today we have the pleasure of having a conversation with Erin Chanel. And we are here today, like in the rest of our episodes, to look at how choice creates in our lives and to look at different possibilities for actually creating a life that works for us now and also for creating a future that will work for us. And what would it take for it to work actually across the planet? So today, Erin, we are so pleased to have you here. Erin is a photographer, artist, creating all kinds of beautiful things. She's when you get a chance to look at her website, you'll see a lot of her photographs front and center when you visit. And so not only is she looking at the beauty of the world from the outside in, but Erin is also a body worker and a facilitator of Access Consciousness, looking at what beauty actually lies within the entirety of a being, and looking at all of the energies that we get to play with. And so today we have the pleasure of looking at wrongness, right? The beauty of wrongness, what's that? So looking at wrongness as the container for insanity. So Erin, thank you so much for being here with us today. And wrongness, the container for insanity. What is that even? It gives me chills up and down my spine.
Yeah, it is exactly that. To me, it's the acid rain of that kills our kindness, that kills the very invitation we be, the playfulness, the joyfulness, and it is something that we can expand beyond with total ease, that we chose and chose and chose for whatever reason. It's not really, what would it take to have a world where we could bounce around gleefully and be the joy that we truly be without being that container for ourselves?
So I'm hearing kind of two different things. One of like where we actually put ourselves in a container, which is the insanity, right? And so we use wrongness to kind of create these limitations around what we see ourselves as, what we see as possible for ourselves out in the world. But also this wrongness as like, just really using it as a way to try and actually be right? It's like you're talking about being joyful. And what kind of popped up for me was, wait a minute, isn't being joyful actually one of the best ways to be wrong? Right? Like, are we actually really allowed to be joyful? Right? Like if you're seriously joyful and having a good time, especially now, like with all the crazy things that are going on in the world and on the planet, right? Like people actually use the words, what's wrong with you? Right? So implying that the wrongness is a natural reaction or response to joyful being. So when did you start to notice that that the wrongness was showing up in life and actually creating something that was very different from the joyful living that you actually knew was possible, right?
Yeah, actually it was really a few weeks ago. I have been using the tools of Access Consciousness for quite a while, and then I started to perceive this space, this digitized space in my future that actually was being created from my past that had no ending. And when I saw that insanity, I had to acknowledge that this is self-created, and what else is possible, and it's never been real. And we hear these words, but to actually step into a space like that for yourself and really know that it might be one of the last times you have to even play there. Even better. And I love what you said about container, like out in the world with all the things that are happening right now. It is wrong to be joyful. Everywhere we're on Facebook being a joyful invitation and not resisting, reacting, aligning, or agreeing with what's going on, that is a larger container of like, no, you have to stay in here. You have to feel like what we feel. I mean, that reminds me of what church has been. Like, we're in this building. This is how we think. This is how it is. Or a school or institution or a home, really.
Yeah.
How many containers do we actually have that we're not even acknowledging?
Yeah, it's like the nesting set of Tupperware where you have the little snack one and then the bigger snack one and then the lunch one and then the dinner ones. And, it's like
colorful. So why wouldn't you like them?
Right. Well, and isn't that actually what we do, right? Like we take all these containers and like we bedazzle them, right? Like we give them glitter, we glue on macaroni and feathers, or maybe even gemstones, or maybe even gold coins, or maybe things, and, it's like, oh, but now it looks pretty, so it should work. Yeah. And yet it's still a container.
Yeah.
And we're still, when we're not within the container, everything else becomes wrongness, as opposed to like, what about the possibility where we actually get to be everywhere? There is no container, right? And we can notice these pockets, right? There's always going to be judgment. Can we even have wrongness without judgment? Right? So there will always be judgment, and there will be, even in our practice, where we judge ourselves and where we judge others. And the question is, can we actually become aware of when that's occurring? Yeah. And then in that moment, can we make a different choice so that we actually obliterate the container? Mm-hmm. So it doesn't mean that what had been in the container doesn't exist anymore. Exactly. It doesn't all have to be contracted and compacted into this one little space within which you're only allowed to function.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I love that, Rebecca. You're brilliant. I adore you. Because I recently heard Gary Douglas say, or I read somewhere that, the whole idea of using these tools, or to choose more consciousness on the planet, or to choose a more conscious life, is not to eradicate judgment. It is actually expanding beyond it, so that it actually, and that was really interesting, to actually include it so that people do have the choice. Yeah. It works for them. And but we don't contract into that invisible life and living and by everything that's in there is ours. And we can stay expanded. We can stay joyful, and it all coexists. And that changed my life. It was really great. Yeah.
Well, and then there's an irony there too, right? Of like, if we resist and react to judgment, right? Then anytime that we perceive judgment, then we actually go into the wrongness, which is a judgment, which is more of what we're actually resisting. So it kind of creates this thing that kind of loops back on itself, instead of just using, and I love this, I mean, in meditation practices, anyone who meditates is using this tool constantly, right? It's not that thoughts don't exist, and whatever discipline, I mean, thoughts, feelings, emotions, right? We make them so real, we make them so solid, right? When we perceive them, when we acknowledge them. And yet it's only when we attach to them that they can actually be solid and real. So like in a meditation practice, when they come in, it's not that you have to have no thoughts, no feelings, no emotions, right? It's just notice it. Notice it as part of everything. And then just ask, okay, so if I buy into that, or if I play with that, if I choose that, is it going to work for me? What is that going to create? And sometimes we use the word create and creation, and like, people kind of glaze over, like, what does that even mean? Right. But just even coming back to that really simple thing of, does this work for you? Right. If it puts you into a place of enjoying being in your body, or enjoying the people you're with, or, just having a sense of lightness in your being, awesome. If it puts you into a place of being a victim, if it puts you into a place that's heavy or contracted, what does that actually create? And this wrongness piece, I see is so interesting, that victim, that whole energy of victimhood, right? And what lots of times occurs is this thing of like, well, if I choose the victimhood, I go into the wrongness, and now I have to actually prove how right I am about being a victim. Like, look at how much of a victim I am. So now I have to prove the rightness of my wrongness, which leads us back to the whole thing of insanity, right? What does that actually create? Not only in our world, but also with all the people in our world and, that we come into contact with. So, when people are looking at this conversation, and so Erin, where are you right now, actually? I'm a little shout box to, Erin has been traveling nonstop for months, right? On her own tour of consciousness and adventure of changing things across the US. And
Thank you, Rebecca.
yeah, so I mean, you started in Alaska.
Yes.
And now you are in Colorado?
I am, and it snowed here yesterday, and the sun just came out, so I'm like, okay, I'm going outside because yeah. So, really, to me, it's about knowing something about being out in the world and being willing to be with the world and not know what's going on. So much of what I am acknowledging is I don't know, and it's okay not to know. And
Yeah.
I thought I really knew a lot of things, and I don't have to even worry about that or be in that or be defined by that or even think about that. It's like, if we really are in this space of, okay, who am I today and what grand and glorious adventure can I create in this 10 seconds? Universe, show me, and not be attached to how that shows up or what we are.
What a huge invitation that is.
Well, and so much of it I don't have words for, and words really get frustrating sometimes. I'll just totally admit. Yeah, you were beautiful with words. I'm really grateful for how you're weaving this together. This has just really been a massive space for me to be willing and keep showing up, and okay, that created this, and so what actually would be more fun, or what actually works for me, and that created this, so what else, and none of it's wrong, and I have no idea where it's going, and it's okay, and it's always been really strange for me to be around folks, and everybody wants to make this wrong, or you should settle down, or you're looking for perfection. And what if there's something we actually know about being undefined and being in the world?
So you're talking about joy, and you're talking about not knowing, and you're talking about being undefined. Now, those are three things that I would guess are probably some of the scariest things to look at for anybody who is actually functioning from any sort of container.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I get it. I mean, I'm ever expanding my container. That's my target for myself personally, and always asking, what would it take to be completely containerless, to be out of form, structure, limitation, out of the significance, and, out of that definition that you're talking about. And it's a practice. For me, it's a practice. And for somebody who's just starting and listening to this, it's like, that, and we talked a little bit about this last week with Stephanie Richardson as well.
I love Stephanie.
Yeah. And a great episode. We just kept going. And we talked about that a little bit too, right? Where, when we were talking about being perfectly imperfect, and how oftentimes we get stuck in this trap of perfection, right? And really, it blends so well with this conversation. Hi, sweetheart. It blends so beautifully with this conversation, because really what we're looking at is that perfection trap is a lot of what is creating the container that we're looking at today.
Yep, exactly. Exactly.
So there's that story, about the man walking on the beach, and there are millions of starfish. And, he's going and picking one up and throwing it in, and picking up another and throwing it in. And someone else comes along and says, what are you doing? There's no way that you can throw all of these starfish back into the ocean. And he says, yes, but for each one that I do, it will have made a difference. So,
yeah. And that makes me teary, because it's like, it makes such a difference to our own lives too. It makes a difference too.
And I see you choosing that. So, this story really illustrates for me what I see you choosing right now. So I want to just again share a little bit about what you've been choosing. And Erin has been. I talk a lot about following the energy. And for me, that's really just being present and being aware of what is, and what's being asked for, and what will actually create more of the future that that will work for me, will create greater on the planet. And so Erin got in her car, started driving, and has been facilitating classes, has been doing sessions in multiple states, sometimes on the same day, with people. And, she may not know what is going to happen in this session between this time and this time, and yet something always occurs. And now neither you or the person that you've been facilitating can ever be the same again.
Yeah.
So yes. So that really, to me, speaks to this whole thing of choice creates, even if we don't know what it is we're creating, and invites us to really get present, so that we can sense into these things that maybe sound a little crazy to some people, right? But to really sense into what information we do have available.
Yeah.
So can you tell me a little bit more, and share with everyone who might be like, she's doing what? Like, this is huge. Like, what, like you were sitting at home and then you just chose to do something that is technically, you're not supposed to do that. Like, that's not how you create a business. And yet you are creating a business and so much more. So what can you share with us?
Well, thank you. And I have always been a gypsy. I've always moved around. I've always lived internationally, and I made it really wrong. And so I know that when I pause and I get a place that it's almost the beginning of the end, I get really bored. So there's something that I know, and I was just willing to be in the energy that, okay, I know something, and be open and follow the energy. So what I'd love to share a little bit about is, it has been really fun to meet up with people, and within 1 hour sessions with the SE sessions, which are energetic structural synthesis of embodiment. So energetic structural synthesis of embodiment, which literally is another way to play with the tools of Access Consciousness, and it eliminates and eradicates the glue of the judgment that holds pain and limitation in our body. Mm-hmm. And within these one sessions, people are, and I love, because it's also another space of not knowing. We just show up. After being a massage therapist for a long time and doing tens of thousands of massages, I was really tired of knowing what that was going to look like for people. And it really turned me on to show up and have no clue of what was possible with this person's body, and just be space and be invitation. And people, I can't believe, after so many massages that I've given in my lifetime, I'm getting feedback like, wow, the pain I've had that I'm headed into surgery and in 3 days is actually gone, or the pain I've had for so long is gone. And I didn't even know if they were receiving anything. And that really has to be part of the willingness, is to not know if people are receiving it and if they are even paying attention.
Yeah.
You just keep choosing and going and choosing and going and having fun for you. And trust that the people that are going to, that people are going to show up to play regardless. No, there's no getting there. And
yeah, I love, so I personally love playing with Essie as well. And
the gift.
even before, you know, when I was working with bodies as well, and working with fascia, playing with fascia has always been,
I would love to
fun for me. Yay! Come on down to Texas.
I will.
I know you will. This girl travels. So even before I had the awareness that we can add in these Essie energies and these other energies together with it, you know, even just listening, you know, fascia is for me such an interesting thing to work with in the body, because when we actually get super present, or my experience, when I get super present with fascia, you can actually follow it. So, you know, we're talking about following the energy. So anyone who's ever worked with fascia, you can kind of get the sense of what this following the energy is like. Because the fascia does that, right? Like when we get present with it, and then it begins to sort of melt, and maybe it starts to move in this direction or twist or, you know, change. And so when we can follow that, and then add the energetic piece of asking questions of the body, of the being, to now see, okay, so what can we actually, what thoughts, feelings, emotions, limitations, you know, things that have become synthesized into the structural embodiment, what can we actually clear and release here, right? Maybe someone can't walk because of some sort of a binding in the fascia of the leg, and yet, you know, there's actually something in their being that's creating how this is showing up. And, you know, suddenly the book that they were unable to write, or that step forward that they were unable to take, suddenly has a space for them to be able to choose it. This is just, it tickles me to talk with you about this and about bodies. And even just, I want to, for anybody watching, even if you're not familiar with energy or access consciousness, you know, just really, just seeing like, what can you receive from this? And even just, you know, perceiving Erin in Colorado, in nature, with her beautiful polar bear, you know, and like, and
we're both thrilled to be in the sun. The sun is such a gift.
Yeah. And just like receive from that. So one of the questions that that I know that you play a lot with, and that I also get, can create so much change for all of us, I know it has for me, is, you know, lots of times we tend to go, when we go into that judgment of wrongness, it's like, what the fuck's wrong with me? You know, or what, you know, what's wrong with me, or why did I do that, or whatever. And then there's this alternative question, right? Of what's right about me that I'm not acknowledging, right? And it's not about what's right about me, like how well did I build my container, right? Did I bedazzle it to fit in with everyone? Right, but it's like, what's actually, like, what can I actually acknowledge about me right now, right? And all those places where, you know, you were talking about being a gypsy of consciousness, right? And having always been a gypsy, and making yourself wrong for that. And yet, by actually embracing that, by actually turning that up, by making that gypsy nature, instead of a wrongness, making it actually into, turning it into and shifting it into a capacity, look what you're creating through that.
Thank you.
So share with us a little bit about how you use that question and how you became aware of that question, or anything else that could help the viewers to be able to practice this too.
Absolutely. There are so many whispers we're receiving from the time we have memories about things we know. We're so resistant to calling them rightnesses. Like, oh my God, I'm really great at that. We're the last ones to acknowledge, unless you come from a family that's full of acknowledgement and praise, we aren't taught to give that to ourselves. Like, what would it take for this reality to allow themselves to praise themselves, and what might that create? And so got another live video going on over here. So I
Hi, Heather.
she'll probably,
I love it.
yeah, more live videos, talking to people from all over the world. How did we get so lucky today? So there were just things that I had to acknowledge to act if we actually want to create our life with outside of what it is, wherever people are, wherever you are, there's always more. There's always more, there's always more. And we're really also taught that there isn't more and that we're wrong for wanting more. And once you get your container, you should really be happy. And some of us will never be happy with that. And I even look at being, even though I'm a Gypsy of Consciousness, what would it take to have a really sweet space that is home, and I could have more than one of those. I can have people that are happy to acknowledge the contribution that I be when I'm around them. So there's all kinds of ways, again, to not know. You really have to not be willing to not know, but embracing the bits of you that give you the highlights on the map to what is possible.
Yeah.
So different for everyone. It could be arts. It could be, you're a wordsmith of magnitude. I'm like, I have to talk. Like, she's just so brilliant. And with work, I'm really, really grateful for how you weave things together. And, you know, for me, it's energies. Everywhere I'm doing interviews, I'm really like, oh my goodness, I don't know if this is for me. And that's not a judgment. It's like, what's really fun. And even within this interview, like, I get to look at that and I get to explore that and I get to be vulnerable with it and go, okay, well, how much fun can I have in this 10 seconds? And what else? And it's never going to actually be, I like interviews, I don't like interviews. And I like to be on the road, I don't like to be on the road. I like to do it this way, I like to do it that way. Whatever that is for people, that is another way we weave that insanity around us. We get to like whatever we want to like whenever we want to like it. And that in good, and I'm going to throw it out there for some reason, that is in with like sex, that is with joy, that's with laughter, that's with play. And again, those things that you mentioned well, you know, we're both mentioning these things, and what would it take to have some real value? Well, what would it take to value those for ourselves? And again, that word value is going to be different for each one of us. For some, have to laugh. Without laughter, they don't, you know, so what creates a life? So follow laughter. Or for some, it is touching bodies. Okay, so follow touching bodies. It is being in nature, follow touching nature. And that's really how I'm looking at this. I love the sun. I love being in nature. I love this big, beautiful world. When people would say, like, what's wrong with you that you always have to go recreate your life? It's like, I never got that. It's a big, beautiful world with beautiful people. And I've always seen the gift of people. And I've always really wondered if I'm starting to get that might be a difference, and cool. And it doesn't, and what else? It's, so.
And I just hear you saying, like, everyone gets to live their life and choose to create it the way they choose to create it. And, you know, you be you, I be me. And like, that really is, that can work. And it's when we try to suppress what that being me is, like, oh, well, I would really love to do that, but I could never do that because. And then what do we actually create in our life? You know, how much resentment do we create? How much, you know, misery do we create? You know, how much do we create illness and different things, you know, to take us out of that? So, so when we give ourselves that space, I see, you know, I can perceive, like, anybody who's watching this, who is in transition, or who is in you know, in a place in their life where, they'd really like to choose something different. And yet, you know, they have, you know, parents' voices in, you know, in this corner, and they have, you know, either their teachers or their employers or their friends' voices, or maybe a partner or a spouse, right?
Children,
it's like, yeah, all these voices about what they should or shouldn't choose. And, like, you know, what would it take to actually perceive the space of this, and really recognize that whatever you choose, you know, whether it is going and traveling the country, or whether it's something that maybe looks a little more, quote, normal, it doesn't actually matter what it is that we choose.
No.
It's actually what would we actually like to be in whatever we choose, and are we willing to acknowledge that we're choosing it, and then enjoy it? And if we don't enjoy it, then change it, right? 4 questions that I absolutely adore, and you know, I teach them in the foundation class, and no, you just taught a foundation class with these as well. But, you know, what is this, right? What is this? Can I change it? How can I change it? Right? And, like, I mean, that's not the 4, but that's how I contract them together, basically. Like, what is this? Can I change it? How can I change it? And that's always available to you. And every time we think, oh, but it's not really for me, because, again, that's the container. Yeah.
It is. And I love how you're weaving this all together. When I really looked at creating this time, because I have taken off and I've lived mobily and globally several times, I really knew I had to choose it with everybody out of my reality. Like, this isn't going to work if I let people actually into my reality. So there's certain things I don't tell people, and it depends on the person. I just look at where they're coming from and go, they can't hear that. And acknowledging what people can and can't hear is a big freedom. And that way we aren't, I don't know about you or anybody watching this, but I used to tell people everything and try to show them everything, and that isn't a kindness to them or me. And so that was another demand, though, is cool. What can people hear? And you know, with Airbnbs all over the place, there's lots of ways to, there's house sitting, there's lots of ways to create actually living. And there's camping when it's nice. There's all kinds of fun stuff. But I knew that was something. And so 6 months prior to actually leaving this last time, I just really started to instill in my own space what I knew and create that space for me. And I love that tool, just for me, just for fun, don't tell anyone. And then depending on who it is, I get to explain it however is fun in that 10 seconds or not. And that, because that really starts to create the space of us. So maybe what this has all kind of been inviting is the space of you requires no container. The space of you has ease in the world. It has ease with all of the things in the world, whether we deem them good, bad, right, or wrong. And whatever that looks like, which we kind of talked about in the beginning. But having this space of me is my best friend, and that gets me a little teary. In my body, my body, and what I know is possible is the friend, is the relationship, is that I've, you know, whatever that continues to be, family, for people that we think it's supposed to look like, that I've always been searching for.
Well, and that's where we're looking for everybody else to get our back. So in order, right, and there's this whole exchange thing, like, but in order for everyone to have my back, I have to be and do all of these things so that I win that from them, right? And it's like, oh, wait, if I actually could have my own back, then I truly could choose anything. And as you're talking, I really get that there is this container of having people like us, right? Like, because like how much of what you're talking about, yeah.
It's
Yeah.
oh my God, am I willing to go beyond all the like in all
Yeah.
the
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, would we, and that's a question for everyone, would you be willing to have people not like you? Like, we all know that there are people who don't like us, and we all know that there will be more and others who don't like us. Right. And yet we're talking about insanity, right? But there is this insanity somewhere of like deep down, right? That, well, maybe if I do this hard enough or right enough or good enough, or if I pretend just right, like, well, then everyone will like me, nobody will hate me, and then therefore I will never be wrong. Right. So yeah, like, really awesome, really awesome that, like, we can actually go out in the world and not be liked, and yet if we're willing to be our best friend, and we're willing to be in communion with what we're choosing and with our bodies, like you said, there's always going to be more showing up, and there's always going to be someone and something and somewhere to play with if we're willing to receive it.
Yeah.
And
we have our own, everywhere we're buying, we don't have our own version of what beauty is, and what that, like, really, that's the only word that pops. I mean, what is our own version of what beauty is? And are we willing to follow that instead of everything? We can have both. What we know can exist on Earth. And everywhere we're thinking that it has to be with the tools already here, like this is a house and these are children and these are animals and this is a job. It's like, well, and what else and what else and what else? There's so much around us that would like to play with us. And that is a level of insanity that I'm willing to. It's the insanity of actually knowing all those whispers that I mentioned have your back, actually, if you're willing to choose them and see what else is possible.
And I love this thing too, where there's also this perception of, like, just because we choose something doesn't mean it becomes automatically a container. So like, if someone's watching this and they're like, well, I'm not ready to quit my job and divorce my family, and it's like, that's actually not even what we're saying, right? It's like, whatever it is for you. So look at the pieces that you love and that really work for you. Like, your job may not be a container, right? You may actually love what you do. And it's like, okay, now what else is even possible beyond that? Where if you truly were to now take all of the governors off, right? Everything that we use to try and slow us down or stay smaller, whatever. If you were to take that off and just actually now fully show up in that role that you're playing with, or the company that you're playing with, or the environment that you're in, right? Like, what could actually be created there that then invites the other people around you to even choose more for them, right? Like the conversations around the water cooler. How often is it like, how cool can you be by proving how miserable your workload is, or how tired you are on Monday because of whatever on the weekend, right? Like, what could we actually choose what could we actually create if we chose something else that we know is possible, and we actually came to work with such joy and enthusiasm for what we were choosing, because we were choosing to be there, and had our back in that. And when everybody wants to go into the trauma and drama around the water cooler, actually just having that sense of being of like, actually that doesn't work for me, and either having fun, making a joke, lightening it up, not having to like make them not talk about that, but also like, what can you insert there that can shift and change it, and be the invitation for other people to know that it is possible. to choose the joy, to choose being out of limitation, out of definition, right? I mean, if you work and you're an auto mechanic and, you know, you secretly love playing guitar, right? Like, why not bring that into the rest of your world if that brings you true joy?
Exactly.
You know, instead of like, well, I'm at work and I work with cars now and like they're two separate things. Like, what if it's all just you? And you could just bring that into everything that you choose. And then like Erin said, you don't have to push it on people or prove it to anybody. And there's some people who may not be interested and may not be willing or even able to receive the information that you know, that you're being even. And just knowing that's okay too. And that's not wrong.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. That's when you buy back into the container. So yeah, exactly. And you have to be willing to keep being you and keep going. And that space that you are for yourself is more fun than you might have ever chosen before.
Yeah.
Because it's not something we're invited into. We compete ourselves into other people's realities. So as you're saying, I'm at work, I'm by the water cooler. So we tend to mimic this reality or go, okay, I'll do small talk. I'll talk about my problems. I'll talk about the weekend I had or didn't have and prove that I belong here. And it's another way we can there's one being insane, and then there's the fun way of being insane, which is going, how much could we celebrate ourselves in this reality? As like the guitar example, wow, I played my guitar this weekend. You don't have to say anything else, but that's something that nobody's even like, why would I say that? It's like, well, that's cool. You know, bring it to work sometime. Play it. Take a break in your office and please like play the guitar for 10 minutes here and there. Like there's just all these ways that as we share ourselves, they can spark things that we would never. And then so-and-so plays this guitar once in a while in the office and and the whole office relaxes and opens up and gets out of the bed and starts to smile. And how does it get even better? And this is how we don't know how it's going to show up. We never know what it's going to look like. And
because in some of those, because even like, let's say, you know, you come in and you're like, I played the guitar this weekend. And like, even if everyone just looks at you blankly, and even if you never bring your guitar in, right? Like you sharing, because in that moment of, I played the guitar this weekend, you're actually choosing to be in the energy of that guitar playing, which for you was actually joyful. So now these people, whether they know how to receive it or not, you're actually gifting them an invitation into that energy of joy and playing guitar, whether they choose it or not.
Yes.
But what you definitely are going to do is put a little something different in their world where it's like, oh, wait a minute. How does this, you know, and that's putting them into question, right? Whether they recognize it or not. And it's like, if you keep showing up like that and not expecting a certain response or an outcome or them to, you know, do or be anything because you were a certain way, it's like, how much do then, you know, they're like, well, you know, he's been sharing that now, or he's been doing this new way of being for like a few weeks now, and he hasn't been fired and he hasn't died, and like, you know, looks like everything's still kind of okay. Well, maybe I'll just try it a little bit.
I like to knit. Oh my God, I just said that at work. I like to knit. And then somebody else should start something. Or I baked a cake. Whatever it is, it's really not a problem. It's not a limitation. It's not something, how much of who we're trying to be is regurgitation of everything.
What you've seen on television, or what you've read in magazines, or what you've seen your parents model, or what you've heard, you know, other people saying around the water cooler. And even like, if you're watching this and you're like, I don't really like this whole energy thing is a little weird and I don't get it and I don't do energy. Just, you know, if you're in a conversation and someone's like, oh yeah, my car broke down this weekend, and someone else is like, oh man, that really stinks. Yeah, I know, you know, I twisted my ankle a little, like it looks fine, but it really hurt. And someone else is like, right? there is actually a palpable energy there when you're present with what's going on. Now, if you come in and you say, oh yeah, I was knitting this weekend, and then somebody else, even if it's one person, is like, oh, I knit. Like, that is such a different energy. Instead of like trying to entrain yourself to the wah, 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 right? If someone comes up to where you are, and I'm not saying it all has to be like this manic up place of like joyful happiness, but like just an invitation to something that is actually real for you, that creates greater, and not greater in a great, not great, but like more expansive way.
And you get to be you. You get to be you. Like how what's the word? Like what an anomaly. Like, oh, I get to actually be me at work. I get to actually be me at the grocery store instead of the person we've been trained to be. It's really more and more fascinating what we kind of do with our children. Like, don't be you, be quiet, don't share that, ask how somebody is, ask how their day is. It's like, and then the answer to that is usually what you shared. It's not so great, or it's okay. And now, and we
don't be too much.
Yeah. And too much is, I like to play guitar. It's like, what if too much is one more step that is like so refreshing? I mean, I can't imagine if I was at a water cooler and somebody just said, I like to knit, I like to play guitar. I'd be like, it does. It completely is like, no, we're talking about something that is not a problem. So what do I do with this?
Yeah, exactly. And if this, like, just to flesh out this scenario even a little more, like if you're looking at this and you're like, well, that's not even possible in my situation. It's like, well, you don't even have to choose to go to the water cooler. Like, what would it create to go somewhere else, or be somewhere else, or look at something else, or call someone else, or even just take a moment to find space within, or within you, all of this, right? And so it's like, again, what is going to work for you? And we're just kind of riffing on all of these different possibilities, and yet, like, what do you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, these simple riffs are, and even with like moms with children, I see Heather Nichols. I'm with Heather Nichols a little bit here, and she has 2 boys. And it's not about how was your day at school, this or that. It's just somebody will say, it's kind of like this. I like this. And we're having a totally different conversation. And even if you don't have a conversation, there's no negating it. It's similar to how you're saying it can be really simple. It's not this manic, oh, I like this and I like this, and now we're talking about concerts and maybe I should be a famous, like, what would it take to be the famous guitar player I ever wanted to be? No, it's more just like acknowledging that it is acknowledging each other. It's like, oh, because you're not your problem. You're not your problem. You're not your sickness. You're not your family. You're part of your family. So everywhere we're not able to talk about, again, back to us, it's like, how many people are like, you ask about them and they share about their children. It's like, okay.
Yeah, that's not what I asked, but okay.
I'd love to know if you had, I don't know, a great sandwich for lunch or whatever. It can be so simple. And really, these little conversations that we're sharing can change a lot out there, because a lot of what is out there, just in my interesting point of view, people wanting to be heard. People are like, hey, look at me, in a way that, what would it take to choose different conversations? And that, Rebecca, if you want to share a little bit, I don't know where we're at in time, but really, I mean, you have a family and you have a beautiful home. How is this different for you? And what do you find brings you joy in that? And everything everybody thinks of. And what I'm grateful for is I'm not like, oh, she has, that. It's like, oh my God, I actually, now that I'm not being judged against, well, judging myself in the judgment of everything that is about not having that, I actually I get to perceive the beauty of you having a home and having a family, where I used to be really judged. You know, my last boyfriend's family was like, she is, she's dangerous. Get her out of here. Like, get rid of her as fast as possible, because she does not compute with our Midwestern Christian based idea of like,
Get married, have kids, settle down.
Why would you have a passport?
Oh boy.
Why would you see all those beautiful places?
Yeah.
So I really, that's where we get to be in the world, and we really get to enjoy it and go, oh my gosh, like, you know, so yeah, if you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, for me personally, it's, you know, it's ever changing, ever evolving, and 100% a practice. And it's something that I'm constantly and consistently choosing. And actually, I just posted on Facebook this weekend. I was having this, so I posted some pictures, and basically I was having this moment because we made, you know, strawberry pancakes and smoothies and pumpkin bread, and like had this whole like morning of creation, and we can make this and we can make that. And it was fun, right? Like I had a good time. The kids had a good time. It was tasty. Everyone loved it. And then there was this mound of dishes and pots and pans and everything in the kitchen. And, and of course, at that point, everyone scatters and there's no one else to be found. And so, you know, there's that moment of like, oh, you know, me again. Now it's got to be me. And now I have to do it, right? And it's like, okay, hold on, time out, right? This is a choice, actually. Like, first, can I please acknowledge the choice to create and cook all those things, and have, even more importantly for me, right? You were talking about value, and it's really like, for me, like the treasure of it, like what's the treasure? And for me, the treasure is the interactions, the silliness, the, you know, the, oh mom, look at, you know, look at me. I'm, you know, whatever. I'm making farts with my armpits while we're making pancakes, because what better time, right? And like, you know, just the interactions and the laughter and the silliness and, you know, like that, having that, sharing that space, right? And it's like, I chose that and I enjoyed it. And so now I have another choice, and it's like, okay, so I can look at this and I can now totally kill all the joy and totally disregard all of the choice that I made to create what I created, you know, by now being in this like, and it's like having to just remind myself, happiness is just a choice. Like, I don't have to be happy for anyone, right? And does it actually work for me to go, like we mentioned a little bit, that victim thing again, right? It's like I could slip into that thing of like, oh, now I'm the victim. I have to clean this up. I'm always the one that cleans it up. And it's like, actually, I don't have to clean this up. Exactly. If I didn't clean it up, at some point, someone else would clean it up, right? Someone would clean it up, probably my husband at some point, right? Or the exterminators, when like all the animals started coming in, like maybe the exterminators would have to clean it up to get to like all the infestation. I mean, who knows, right? I don't know what it would create, but like,
it is possible.
Right. But like, I didn't have to do it. And yet I then couldn't acknowledge the next piece of like, okay, one, I don't want to choose to be in this funk, because that doesn't work for me. And it's all a creation. And two, I really enjoy a clear space. Mm-hmm. So then I looked at it and I'm like, okay, so I can either hem and haw and whine and have it take 1,000,000 years to do this and be in misery. That's one choice, right? I cannot do it and then passively aggressively like coerce other people into doing it, right? Or I could, and 1,000,000 other choices, including I could choose to just put it away, like clean it up the way I like it, and then acknowledge my creation the whole way through, from clear as I enjoy it to totally chaotic to clear as I enjoy it and ready for the next thing. So, you know, it's like we were talking about before in meditation, right? It's not that this stuff doesn't come into our worlds. It's just really, what do I want to choose here?
Yep.
Right? And what's going to work for me and my body?
Yeah. And that question is brilliant. What do I want to choose here? It's similar to me being on the road. Being on the road isn't for everyone. And that's where I was instilling, like, okay, I know something. And when I'm on the road and say it's rainy or it's cold and I don't have a home for the night, like, I literally will create a lot of my days not knowing where I'm going to end them. But I just don't buy what that looks like. It's similar to the dishes. Everywhere that's a problem, that's my choice. So if the dishes are an adventure, and if where, you know, it's raining and what, you know, gosh, there's so many warm places. There's so many warm, beautiful places to go have a glass of wine or have a cappuccino and actually follow where my body's going and what could bring some joy to my body. And that's what you just said as well. Beautiful.
Yeah.
You're brilliant.
So there are so many tools in this episode. I just, you know, I invite anyone watching this, you know, especially like if you watch this and had any judgment about it, like what would it take to watch it again and start to really look, okay, so what are pieces here that I can pull out and just play with, even, you know, just for me, just for fun, right? I don't have to tell anybody that I saw this show with these two ladies talking about some crazy stuff. And, you know, now I'm asking questions. Like, you can just play with it for you and just see. And if you kind of like how it shows up in a new way, then maybe would you like to play with it even more? So Erin, thank you so much. Before we wrap up, I'm just wondering, what do you have coming up? What would you like to invite people to? And how can people find you?
Well, thank you. ErinChanel.com. It's ErinChanel. And I'm on a foundation tour. So I'm headed to Illinois next week for a foundation, over to Oregon, then Utah, then Northern California. And then I'll be in the southern states. I'll be coming to trade Essie with Rebecca and and really open to what's possible. I'm actually going to Costa Rica. Well, I get to go to Costa Rica for a trip too, for one of the Access Consciousness 7 days coming up. So I do facilitation, I do distance SOP sessions, and when I'm around, I do the energetic synthesis of structural embodiment. If you want to find Rebecca or I, is such an invitation with the body. It is something different and a real gift. I'm super passionate about that. So yeah, what else is possible? And you know, Facebook, private message either of us, and how many more conversations, simple, fun, joyful conversations are actually possible everywhere we think we're going to get there through our sharing our problems, which is only just how we've been taught to communicate. You know, just really, Rebecca, thank you. You're such a gift, such a joy, and I adore you.
Thank you so much for that, Erin. And it is an honor to speak with you and have this conversation and to invite whatever it is that we're inviting and whomever we're inviting and however it shows up, really more magic on the planet.
Yeah.
Asking for that to show up with total ease. So thank you so much for joining us. And for the rest of you, thank you for joining us. If you are enjoying the Art of Creation show, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Please also like us on Facebook. And we've just started a new group, and I wonder how that is going to show up and what we're going to create there. But that is also a place moving forward where if we do want to have more conversations around any of the topics, we can do that as well. So inviting you to join that as well. Post your comments, post your questions. Let us know what you're curious about. I wonder what you will choose over the next week. And I look forward to playing then.